Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be getting underway in just a few moments, and our special guests will be arriving soon. So may I kindly request that you please take your seats for the opening of the ministerial segment. May I also request everyone to turn off their phones or set them to silent mode. Before we begin, I have a few words about the efforts by the Commission to reduce the amount of paper used in conjunction with sessions. As in previous years, you should have received at registration a USB flash drive containing the session documents and other information about the session. In addition, all documents can be found on the Commission website. Therefore, only one copy of the Commission's documents will be given to each delegation upon request. Delegates are encouraged to download or print them out in advance of the session, and you may also use the self-service copy center located in the delegates' working area in meeting room A. Please also note that all draft resolutions can be downloaded from the website of the Advisory Committee on Permanent Representatives, or ACPR. Please get in touch with delegations liaison officers to obtain the username and password. We are also pleased to inform you that all meetings and public areas are fully equipped with wireless connectivity and power sources. In addition, laptop computers are available for loan upon request by member state delegations. Interested delegations can inquire at the registration desk located on the ground floor of this building. Finally, the Executive Secretary is hosting a gala reception tonight for all delegates starting at 6:30 p.m. in the reception area of the UNGA. Each delegation should have received an invitation card earlier today, and we hope to see you all tonight. Which one? Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our special guests now entering the room. His Excellency, Honorable Joe Natuman, Deputy Prime Minister of Vanuatu. His Excellency, Honorable Enele Sopoaga, Prime Minister of Tuvalu. His Excellency, Mr. Tommy Remengeso, President, Republic of Palau. His Excellency, Mr. Lee Tush, Senior Minister of Cambodia and Acting Chair of the 72nd Session of the Commission. His Excellency General Thanasak Patimapragon, Deputy Prime Minister of Thailand. Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. And Mr. Mitch Shear, Secretary of the Commission. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, at this time we will begin the opening ceremony with the traditional parade of flags of the members and associate members of the Commission. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, may I now request His Excellency Mr. Lee Tush, Senior Minister of Cambodia and Acting Chair of the 72nd session of the Commission, to preside over the meeting.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Mr. President of Palau, Your Excellency, Prime Minister of W, Your Excellency, Deputy Prime Minister of Thailand, Your Excellency, Deputy Prime Minister of Vanuatu, Excellencies, Madam Executive Secretary, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the meeting is called to order. It's an honor and privilege for me to be present here today, and on behalf of the chair of the 72nd session to preside over the opening of the 73rd session of the Commission. Before we move into today's agenda, please allow me to say a few words. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the 72nd session of the Commission that comes to an end today was characterized by the theme Science, Technology, and Innovation for Sustainable Development. In the past 2 years, after the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, countries has indeed started translating their commitments into strategies and actions to try to keep the promise of a more sustainable, safe, and equitable world. At the regional level, this demonstration of commitment saw the adoption in March at the 4th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development of a roadmap for regional cooperation on implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The roadmaps laid out priorities areas, implementation arrangements, and a process for tracking progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. Countries in the region has also outlined guiding principles and concretized their priorities in a few sectoral areas. A ministerial declaration to incorporate the Sustainable Development Goals into transport policy in order to promote Sustainable Development Goals into transport systems in the Asia-Pacific region. Together with it, a new regional action plan on transport development for 2017-2021 was adopted last December. In statistics, a collective vision and framework for action by the Asia-Pacific statistical community, advancing official statistics for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was also deliberated. The Commission, as decided 2 years ago, also commenced work in new domains with active deliberations at the inaugural sessions of the Committee on Information and Communication Technology, Science, Technology and Innovation last year, and the Committees on Energy in January of this year. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of work ahead of us. Collective regional action and cooperation are vital to achieve the promise of the 2030 Agenda. And I have observed a dynamic leadership, a strong commitment for ESCAP in supporting member states in their implementation efforts by helping to translate global commitments into transformative regional strategies. I thank you for your attention. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it's now my duty to conduct the election of officers for the 73rd session of the Economic Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. I now invite nomination for the chair of the 73rd session. I recognize distinguished delegates of Fiji.
Mr. Chair, I have the great honor to propose His Excellency Mr. Enele Sopoanga, the Honorable Prime Minister of Tuvalu, for the position of Chair of the 73rd session of the Commission. I am confident that under his able leadership, the 73rd session will be led to a successful conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The distinguished delegates of Fiji has nominated His Excellency Mr. Enele Sopoanga, Prime Minister of Tuvalu, as Chair of the 73rd session of the Commission. Would any delegation wish to second the nomination? Recognize distinguished delegate of Mongolia, please.
Mr. Chair, I have the great pleasure in seconding the nomination of His Excellency Mr. Enele Sopoanga, the Honorable Prime Minister of Tuvalu, for the position of Chair of the 73rd session of the Commission. I, too, am confident that under his able leadership, the 73rd session will be led to a successful conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mongolia. Thank you. Any other delegation want to second the nomination? Please. Marshall Islands.
The Marshall Islands is honored to second the nomination.
Thank you. Thank you for seconding the nomination. The nomination of His Excellency Enele Sopoanga, Prime Minister of Tuvalu, as Chair of the 73rd session of the Commission, has been proposed by distinguished delegates of Fiji and has been seconded by distinguished delegates of Mongolia and Marshall Islands. Are there any other nominations for Chair of the 73rd session? I see none. It is my great pleasure then to declare His Excellency Mr. Enele Sopoanga, Prime Minister of Tuvalu, duly elected by the acclamation as Chair of the 73rd sessions of the Commission. For the Vice Chairs of the Ministerial session, I propose with the consent of the Commission that following the practice adopted in previous sessions, Rule 13 of the Rules of Procedures and the Commission, providing for the election of only 2 Vice Chairs, be suspended for this session. With your concurrence and also in accordance with past practice, I propose that all ministerial level heads of delegation in attendance be elected as Vice Chairs of the Commission. If there are no objection, it is so decided. The list of Vice Chairs will be circulated by the Secretariat to you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it's now my honor to invite His Excellency Mr. Enele Sopoanga, Prime Minister of Tuvalu, to conduct the session from this point onward. While he's coming, I'd like to say how much we appreciate his leadership, and I learned that there is 9 islands in Tuvalu. He just told me that only 8.5, because half of the islands has gone to the sea. So if all of you want to visit Tuvalu, please take time to visit Tuvalu, the lovely beaches. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you, all of you. Thank you. So, finish.
Excellencies, I now had great pleasure to deliver my statement of acceptance of the nomination and the election of myself, Prime Minister of Tuvalu, as the chair of the 73rd session of the UN ESCAP Commission. First of all, let me deliver this in recognition of this great honor to Tuvalu. I want to deliver this from the podium. His Excellency, Mr. Tommy Remengesau, President of Palau, His Excellency, Mr. Lee Touch, Senior Minister of Cambodia and Acting Chair of the 72nd session of the Commission, Excellency General Thanasak Pratimama Pragon, Deputy Prime Minister of Thailand, Ms. Shamshad Akhtar, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Ms. Helen Clark, Ambassador Williams, and Excellencies, Ministers, leaders of delegations, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you all for the confidence that you have placed in me and the great honor that have been bestowed on me and the country of Tuvalu to chair the session, this session of ESCAP. Together with my colleagues, the Honorable Vice Chairs, I shall endeavor to do my very best to discharge the responsibilities of serving your chair with the support of the ESCAP Secretariat. Let me assure you that we truly believe if we work together collectively, we can get back the other half of one of the islands which has disappeared, as the outgoing chair of the Commission has said. But I bring greetings and best wishes from Tuvalu and the Pacific Small Island Developing States. First, it is with great humility and honor that again, I acknowledge the kind invitation of the government of Thailand and ESCAP for me to deliver this keynote address. Let me also thank or extend our sincere gratitude to the government and people of the Kingdom of Thailand for their warm hospitality, and also extend our sincere condolences for the passing of His Majesty the King of the Royal Kingdom. We join you in your time of mourning. It is also with much honor that I accept with great humility this responsibility that has been given to me. I'm taking this up, Excellencies, because I believe that the Commission, the ESCAP, has provided and is continuing to provide a significant regional platform which has much to offer to those particularly who believe in improving our regional and international cooperation. The challenges we face, whether it's climate change, energy security, or ocean degradation, are all too real and too difficult, if not impossible, for individual countries to address, especially for small island countries like mine. The essence of sustainable development begins with the principle of ownership of issues and priorities by our people, for there can be little sustainability without that. We do feel a strong sense of ownership over the SDGs, and I would regard their implementation as the highest priority for our region. I say that knowing that the SDGs is the most comprehensive platform of targets and indicators that we can begin to use to implement our critical development priorities, as I have alluded to. The greatest challenge of all in our time, we agree, is climate change, and particularly for vulnerable island countries like my own. It is well acknowledged there cannot be any sense in espousing the achievement of our Agenda 2030 or SDG targets unless the issues of climate change is effectively addressed. The real need now is taking urgent and concrete actions. But for actions to have the desired results, we need agreed targets and ways of measuring our progress and commitment as we move forward. In implementing the Paris Agreement, Excellencies, and our nationally determined contributions, let's start by looking at implementing our agreed targets and success indicators under SDG 13, and those others relating to renewable energy, oceans, and means of implementation. We are very proud of the Paris Agreement, and I'm very proud of the commitments that my own country, Tuvalu, has made, like many of the small island countries in the Pacific and other regions of the world, under our respective NDDs. But it's time to walk the talk and use all means to ensure that we follow through with our commitment. Our theme for this 73rd Commission on regional is on regional cooperation on sustainable energy. And this is timely and fitting, as the access to electricity based on an increased share of clean and renewable energy sources is a critical means of implementing SDGs. The Pacific has been described as being extraordinarily dependent on oil and among the most vulnerable in the region to oil price volatility. And in response, many Pacific Island countries have set ambitious renewable energy targets to reverse the heavy reliance on imported fossil fuels and to provide power to the 70% of households that remain without modern electricity services throughout the Pacific sub-region. My own country, Tuvalu, has 100% access to electricity, but we would like to make a dramatic shift to renewable energy. So we have set a target of 100% renewable energy in the electricity supply sector by 2025. And this target is included in our NDCs under the Paris Agreement. We are making good progress in achieving this target. The shift to renewable energy is further amplified by the Pacific Island countries who have declared recently in the regional meeting of ministers of energy in Tonga of reaching a 100% on renewable energy. This is an ambitious target that the island leaders of energy have set for the island countries in the Pacific. But despite this progress, and we are very grateful for the support of partners in moving us forward in implementing our renewable energy and energy efficiency, particularly the governments of the European Union, governments of Austria, New Zealand, Taiwan, and United Arab Emirates, Japan, and other institutions as well, UNIDO and the World Bank. Despite this support and these progresses, we should not, in our view, forget the history and the root cause of human-induced phenomenon called climate change or global warming, hence climate change. Because we are all well aware that the leader of some of the countries, leading countries, are issuing statements that are very discouraging, very distressing, to countries, especially those who are already suffering from the effects of climate change and sea level rise. We must take collective actions to take forward the strong leadership so that we implement the Paris Agreement without issuing any statements that try to destabilize the implementation of the agreement. One particular country some countries have not ratified the Paris Agreement. In our view, this is discouraging. In our view, we must stand together to collectively move forward the agenda on energy for a new energy mix that will save the world, save the most vulnerable, and save everybody. We cannot go back and go to energy sources that will affect and damages the livelihoods of countries, not only small islands, but the rest of the world. There is no point in trying to go to industries that will kill the planet and kill the survival of people. On a dead planet, there will be no jobs. There will be no sources of livelihoods. Let us move forward together. Let us amplify the voice of those vulnerable from this region, through this body, to attract and encourage strong leadership so that we come to COP23 in Bonn with a strong resolute to implement the Paris Agreement without any diversions, without any going back. Let those who are standing by and they continue to deny and push issues of denials be left behind on their own. But let us work together to move forward and reward those who are progressive, who can benefit from a new source, new mix of energy as we move forward to ensure energy security, but especially to address climate change. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have a UN conference on oceans coming up, SDG, to address the targets of SDG 14. And we join Pacific Island countries and many others who have given strong support to the need for actions to address and fully implement and achieve the goals of SDG 14 on oceans and seas. And therefore, we would like to give our strong support to the resolution that has been sponsored and coordinated by the delegation of Fiji. In conclusion, Excellencies, I want again to emphasize the need for us to stand together and amplify the voices of member countries of the UNESCAP, particularly those in the Pacific, those most vulnerable, LDCs and SIDS, so that we can further leverage this voice for further amplification at a regional and international level. And I do pray that out of this Commission's deliberations, we will be very resolute and strong on concrete actions to move forward our support for sustainable energy, but particularly on policies to address climate change. Excellency, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I wish this session all the best and good outcome for the sake of everybody in ESCAP region. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, this Commission session is the first after Mr. Antonio Guterres, the 9th Secretary General of the United Nations, took office on January 1st, 2017. The Secretary General is unable to attend the Commission, but he has recorded a video message that perhaps we need to...
Congratulations to the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific on its 70th anniversary. This dynamic institution is at the heart of the largest trading hub in the world. Asia and the Pacific are also leaders in science, technology, and innovation. At the same time, many challenges confront this region, which is home to half the world's poor. And I applaud ESCAP's effort to reduce poverty, protect the environment, and realize the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The Asia and the Pacific region is the leading South-South provider, sharing knowledge and resources with others. Your spirit of openness and willingness to work beyond borders is critical to enhancing multilateralism. I wish you continued success as we build a better future for the people of the Asia-Pacific region and our world. Thank you.
Can you give a big hand to the message from Secretary General, please? Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is now my pleasant duty to invite the Executive Secretary, Ms. Shamshad Akhtar, to deliver her policy statement. Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 73rd session of the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. 2017 marks ESCAP's 70th anniversary, so I'm going to have a bit of a long speech. This milestone gives us a rare opportunity for reflection. 70 years ago, ours was a region devastated by conflict and colonial empires dictated the lives of our people. China was in the grip of civil war. The Indian subcontinent was undergoing its transition to independence and partition. A long-fought struggle for self-determination had begun in Southeast Asia. Political instability was rife, poverty and famine endemic, social tensions widespread. Turn the clock. First, at the Asian Relations Conference in 1947, the Indian Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, spoke of, and I quote, the end of an era and the threshold of new period of history. Our growth story since bears testimony to the resilience, ingenuity, and hard work of ordinary men and women across the Asia-Pacific. Our region now accounts for over a third of the world's output. We are driving global growth, global trade, and increasingly science, technology, and innovation. Society has benefited from a fall in poverty to 15% in 2012, down from 50% in 1990. Unprecedented success has transformed people's lives and shifted the world's center of economic gravity eastward. We are now taking the lead in finding global solutions to global problems. To quote President Xi Jinping, and I quote, "In a world of growing interdependency and challenges, no country can tackle the challenges, the world's problems on its own." During these 70 transformative years, ESCAP has prided itself on being the trusted partner of all of its member states. The institution has reformed and reinvented itself to serve the needs of the region, finding multilateral solutions to regional problems. ESCAP's normative work has underpinned treaties, agreements, and standards which you have approved. Our response to emerging challenges, our solid analysis has underpinned our response to emerging challenges and opportunities. Our technical cooperation programs have provided policy advice and capacity building. Concrete outcomes were the establishment of the Asian Development Bank, agreements on Asian highways and railways, policy support for promoting intra-regional trade, and enhancement of social policy frameworks. With unwavering commitment to UN principles, we promote multilateralism, inclusiveness, and openness. These principles are still pertinent today as we look to the future and address growing inequalities and the denial of the basic rights and services to many citizens, even today. We need to build on diversity and strengths of our different subregions. Global governance and international cooperation must work to meet the demands of countries with special needs. In particular, we must lend a voice to the small island states that are on the front lines of climate change. These countries are shouldering a disproportionate burden of the cost of greenhouse gas emissions which are generated elsewhere. We need to assist them to build resilience to climate-induced natural disasters and work collaboratively for better management of oceans and their resources. Least developed countries need to expand productive capacities and increase their levels of social and economic development, while landlocked developing countries need to become more land-linked to better engage with the global economy. Properly managed, the future of Asia and the Pacific is bright. We are on track to make up half of global GDP by 2050. China has already overtaken the United States in 2014 to become the largest economy in purchasing power parity, with the prospect of overtaking the US in market exchange rate terms by 2030. India has the potential to become the second largest economy in the world by 2050 in PPP terms. ASEAN is on course to be an integrated economy of over $5.2 trillion by 2025. Average incomes in our emerging economies should close a great deal of the gap with developed economies by 2050. The Asia Pacific is ready to step into the breach as an advocate of a global governance system. Growing leadership in this area was further confirmed last weekend in Beijing at the Belt and Road Initiative Summit. World leaders gathered to express their support for better connectivity, not only connecting Asia to itself, but connecting it to the world markets and connecting world markets to Asia by developing hard and soft infrastructure to jumpstart trade and industrial development. Other ambitious plans include the Euro-Asia Initiative and Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific strategy, and others that I am not covering in interest of time. All these initiatives are integral to the ESCAP's regional cooperation mandate. The Asia Pacific is poised to grow by 5.1% in 2018, although lower than pre-global crisis trends. Good news, growth has stabilized. But global dynamics are changing. Nationalism is exploiting mistrust of globalization and driving myopic protectionism in many of our export markets. If global uncertainty does not abate, this could reduce our region's developing countries' growth by 1.2 percentage points lower than our baseline projections. Our region has categorically reiterated its commitment to promoting free trade, investment, and greater liberalization. Our leaders are saying no to protectionism, which, in the words of Mr. Putin recently, would slow down the recovery of global economy. The region's economic outlook continues to depend on how we manage downside risks. We need to harness sustainability across the region, fostered through greater economic cooperation and integration. We will need to enhance domestic and regional demand. We need to enhance and improve quality of governance in public and private sectors. Growth needs to be led through productivity gains rather than factor accumulation. We also need to strengthen and diversify our financial system to support trade and investment, but now more sustainable development. And we need to continue to promote technological innovation while working to improve the quality of education and training for our children and workforce. Rebalancing and restructuring in China will need to be calibrated effectively. What's good for China is good for the world, as the saying goes. Our focus must shift, however, to the quality of growth, to reduce inequalities and overcome environmental and climate-related challenges. With monetary policy tightening, the right mix of prudential policies will be needed to mitigate the exchange rate depreciations and ensure financial and price stability. Responsible fiscal policy could play a more active role. Let me now turn to our bread and butter. Resolute implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, together with the Paris Agreement on Climate Change and the Addis Ababa Action Plan, will help the Asia-Pacific to confront emerging challenges and navigate turbulent times. ESCAP is the region's most inclusive intergovernmental platform, offering space for consensus building to address systemic regional challenges, cope with shared vulnerabilities and external shocks, and promote resilient infrastructure connectivity. ESCAP offers a voice to all our countries to share their plans for regional cooperation and integration. Our regional solutions to support the 2030 Agenda promote shared prosperity and our people's well-being. In this context, the special body on countries with special needs is an integral part of the Commission because our priority is to safeguard the interest of these countries and ensure no one is left behind. We not only support the international programs and action plans for these countries, but produce the Asia-Pacific countries with special needs development report annually. In 2017 issue, our focus has been to discuss investing in infrastructure for inclusive, sustainable future. This builds, of course, on our previous analysis on bolstering productive capacities and mapping the 2030 Agenda against national action plans of the countries with special needs. We have operationalized several regional forums to ensure they support you all in the implementation of two priorities: sustainable development and regional economic cooperation and integration. Through these platforms, we promote cross-sectoral linkages and means of implementation of the 2030 Agenda. They are reinforced by ESCAP's sectoral committee work programs, all intergovernmental. Our sectoral committees have been realigned to operationalize the 2030 Agenda, drawing on the multi-sectoral strengths of ESCAP. Allow me to elaborate further on these forums. First, the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development has evolved as a coordinating intergovernmental body. Its role is to define priorities, oversee the implementation of the SDGs, promote regional policy coherence, and follow up and review of the SDGs. Transboundary SDGs will be reinforced by technical work to foster regional cooperation and integration, ensure resolution of cross-border issues, and development of connectivity. The regional roadmap lays out priority areas, defines processes, implementation and technical cooperation arrangements, and institutionalizes the tracking of SDGs progress at regional level. An SDG resource facility will soon be operationalized to facilitate member states' implementation of SDGs. We count on the Commission's endorsement of this strategic forum. Second, through 4 rounds of consultation, the Asia-Pacific High-Level Dialogue on Financing for Development has delivered outcomes and tailored support to member states. An eminent expert group on tax policy and public expenditure management for sustainable development was established to advise the region. We have helped bolster already public-private partnership arrangements and assisted the development of regulatory frameworks for financial inclusion while maintaining financial stability and consumer protection. As a regional think tank, we have produced 50 financing for development pieces since 2014 alone, not to mention so many other think pieces in different sectors that we have produced. Reinforcing both these platforms are the intergovernmental deliberations. ESCAP has developed on regional economic integration, cooperation, and integration. Our work in this area aims to promote seamless, sustainable, and resilient connectivity while ensuring a balance of social, economic, and environmental considerations. We have released at this Commission 5 analytical reports on regional cooperation and integration, an overall report, and a report on each of our sub-regions. The ESCAP Commission and Secretariat has been reconfigured to respond to the 2030 Agenda. Our enhanced conference structure, approved by you, ensures an integrated approach, exploiting our sectoral strengths. Allow me to outline several examples of areas where we have recorded substantial progress. More will occur as we progress on these items that I'm going to discuss. First, the operationalization of the Energy Committee, supported by a new energy division. It lays the foundation for regional collaboration on SDG 7, focused on universal energy access, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. It is ironic the region faces an acute energy deficit despite its rich hydrocarbon and renewable energy resources. Energy supply is stifled by inadequate energy connectivity. This prevents the even distribution of energy resources and the grid integration of renewable energy. To deliver on SDG 7, the region has to provide electricity to 420 million, offer reliable power to industry, and reduce further the region's energy intensity. So in light of these issues, the Energy Committee has requested ESCAP to support the region-wide energy transition to sustainable energy. There's a lot of more work that is going on under this. Let me move to the second. The Ministerial Conference on Transport adopted an integrated regional action program for sustainable transport connectivity in Asia Pacific, a blueprint for enhancing transport connectivity to support regional integration and achieving a number of SDGs was put together. Member states have adopted 2 model agreements and a model logistics information system to harmonize operational standards along regional corridors. In parallel, an Inter-Regional Coordination Committee on Transport has been established to foster links between Asia and Pacific. Work is underway to support the implementation of regional goals for road safety to address the annual loss of about 400,000 lives on our roads. There's much more again, but I'll stop on the transport with this. Third, the joint committee session of STI and ICT that you formulated, this joint committee, has considered the role of these critical elements as an SDG means of implementation, in particular on SDG 17. This committee endorsed the master plan for the Asia-Pacific Information Superhighway, offering an opportunity to build more resilient infrastructure and to enable use of ICT, so valid for the Pacific Islands, among other countries, and also the landlocked countries. The committee further agreed on convening the Asia-Pacific Innovation Forum to strengthen regional STI cooperation. I have set up an STI advisory committee also of the distinguished STI experts from the region to help us. ESCAP is strengthening the STI ecosystem by ensuring the dynamic centers exploit STI's potential. Let me turn to the fourth point that I wanted to highlight. The reconstituted Committee for Macroeconomic Policy, Poverty Reduction, and Financing for Development now offers an opportunity to promote financing in support of SDGs. This is the only intergovernmental platform on financing in the UN system. Tax and expenditure policies must be designed to mitigate inequalities while bridging the development divide, financing social safety nets, and promoting sustainable climate-friendly investments. Public-private partnerships and deeper, more diversified capital markets to service demands for both equity and debt need to be part of the solution. Through our financing for development work, we will share knowledge of financial innovation to promote inclusive finance, always balanced with financial stability considerations. Let me turn to the fifth area. Our Statistics Committee has endorsed the collective framework an action plan to support regional statistical development to tackle the gaps in statistical capacity for the SDGs. Sixth, the Trade and Investment Committee now supports completely SDG 17. It has promoted the first framework agreement on cross-border paperless trade facilitation, enhanced online data sets, which are even being used by the World Bank, the Asia-Pacific Research and Training Network on trade to strengthen capacity for trade negotiations and development of national export and investment strategies. ESCAP has developed several online tools, but in this case to help improve analysis through SDG indicators and supported SME connections to international markets. ESCAP will continue to act as the regional center devoted to strengthening the means of implementation for both the SDGs and the Addis Ababa Action Plan, with focus on FFD and STI, and I also include ICT as a means of implementation. Finally, but the most important, ESCAP has restructured its social development division to support the implementation of several SDGs. We are following up on the Beijing 2020 declaration with an emphasis on enhancing the recognition of women's rights, raising women's labor force participation, regrettably a bit on the decline, increasingly women's economic empowerment and gender-based budgeting. Addressing gender equality could add 4.4 trillion to Asia-Pacific's GDP by 2025. So I wonder why leaders don't expedite this move. We are pursuing technical work on aging. The share of Asia-Pacific's aging population is set to grow rapidly from 12 to 25% by 2050, with 650 million more people living with disabilities. The aging population and those suffering from disabilities will together impact growth and increase demand for social safety nets. ESCAP is now undertaking third regional review of the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging. In 2012, we provided the world's first set of regionally agreed disability inclusive development goals, to pick on one example. The Asia-Pacific, as you may know, is a source of 98 million migrants, but it also hosts 60 million migrants. Overall, overseas migration has mobilized 279 billion in remittances alone for this region, alleviating balance of payment pressures while boosting household consumption and living standards. It provides an opportunity to finance sustainable development too. Generally, migrants work in vulnerable environments, lack social security and other fundamental rights. ESCAP will hold a regional consultation for the Global Compact on safe, orderly and regular migration to assist our member states develop a regional perspective that can feed into the global negotiations. ESCAP has launched its first Asia-Pacific social panorama, focusing on people-centered transformation. The report's policy simulations confirm growth alone will not lead to social development unless it generates decent jobs and broader coverage of social protection. ESCAP has created the online social protection toolbox to assist policymakers in this area. Your Excellencies, I would indeed now conclude. In pursuing the implementation of Agenda 2030, let me make first a very big point. We don't do this all alone. We have partnerships. We work as one UN. We are the hub of regional coordination mechanism. We work with a number of UN agencies very closely. We work with a number of think tanks and various other bodies. ESCAP is today working as one ESCAP. All the sectoral things that I described are not happening on a standalone basis by one sector, but in partnerships with the directors across the different sectors. Most of all, let me say that ESCAP will pursue the Secretary General's 3 reform initiatives as and when they unfold. I'm a change agent of United Nations. I believe in a humble way I've tried to bring a change in management. It's painful, but it's worth it in terms of the result. So, Secretary General's 3 priorities. First, to improve the peace and security architecture. Second, to reposition the UN development system at the global, regional, and country levels to address the needs of the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement. I have written to all the regional UN regional resident coordinators. I'm working through the regional coordination mechanism with UN funds and programs. We will do much more together in this tight budgetary constraint environment. His third priority is to make the United Nations more nimble, efficient, effective, and the most exciting thing for us is that he will cut a lot of bureaucracy, hopefully, and he will definitely simplify the processes and procedures, which we are looking forward to. And we, of course, count on his support for decentralization because we are a regional arm and we are the eyes and ears on the ground for him. Thank you for your attention. So now, before getting into the substance of these matters, let us take inspiration from the reign of His Majesty the King. I haven't been in Thailand for that long, but I have seen how people's lives have been impacted by his messages. In this context, I would like our team to play a short video prepared by the Royal Thai government. The United Nations in Thailand shares the loss and sorrow felt over at the passing of His Majesty. His legacy, the self-sufficiency economy philosophy, which focused on people and the environment, has served for years as a model for sustainable development and is highly relevant to much of what we will discuss during this commission. So please join me in offering the condolences to the people of Thailand.
The first episode of His Majesty's development work began with the royal visits to see his subjects in all the regions throughout the country. The nation's roots had led him to be familiar with the topographical conditions of the country, the way of life, as well as the diverse culture and traditions of the people. This set the beginning of the Royal Archives, which collect important information for the development of the nation. Above all, His Majesty had been touched by happiness and warmth amidst his big family, which is his subjects. Seeing the topographical conditions of the area and the way of life of the people, the major initiatives at the initial stage of His Majesty's reign focused at relieving the urgent plight and trouble of the people in terms of medical care, public health, social welfare, and education. His Majesty found that the majority of people were poor and underprivileged due to unproductiveness of the soil. In the following decades, since 1966, His Majesty's initiatives emphasized solutions to the problems related to soil, water, forest, and agriculture. He started conducting research and experimentation in agriculture in different forms, which led to the beginning of the Royal Chitlada projects taking place in the palace compound. His Majesty also lessened the people's difficulties in occupations and living, for example, by giving fish breeds such as Java tilapia and Nile tilapia for further distribution among his subjects. He commanded the construction of Khao Tao Reservoir and Hoi Mong Khon Road in Hua Hin district of Prachuap Khiri Khan province, which was known as the first rural development project initiated by His Majesty the King. These three palaces came into existence in the following decade. They served as the centers of morale and encouragement for the people living in remote areas close to the borderlines. At the same time, these palaces act as his office headquarters, which enable him to deeply assess the core of the problems in each particular area. This marked the starting point of the long-term development projects, all of which have provided great benefits for the Thai people up to the present time. With sharp, profound, and far-sighted wisdom, His Majesty has laid a foundation with the aim of making the people strong and healthy, and to give them an opportunity to pursue education for occupational promotion purpose. Examples are the development of water sources to relieve the problems of flooding, water shortage and water pollution, the development of agriculture in terms of plants, animals and fishery, the development of natural resources and the environment, namely conservation of the watershed areas and mangrove forests, the solutions to the problem of water pollution by natural means, and the use of mechanical aeration devices called Chai Patana aerators, the solutions to the problem of traffic congestion in Bangkok metropolis by networks of roads, and the research and experimentation in alternative energy in different forms, ranging from gasohol to biodiesel. When Thailand encountered the growth of the bubble economy coupled with the deterioration of the environment as a result of the progress of the industrial sector, His Majesty granted an initiative which depicted his far-sighted vision for the effective tackling of the problem. His Majesty offered to the Thai people an initiative, the New Theory Farming Practice, which is a systematic set of guidelines for effective management of land and water in a limited area to ensure optimum benefits. The great economic crisis which took place in 1997 provoked trouble affecting the Thai people in all sectors of production. His Majesty the King then gave the people the initiative concerning the philosophy of sufficiency economy, which is a philosophy guiding the middle path in all modes of conduct in daily life for the people at all levels. This has become the main pillar for all sectors of the Thai people to adhere to in order to survive through the crises. Many businesses and enterprises adjusted their operations, regained strength, and started to progress in a secure and sustainable manner. The people are happy, I am happy too.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I would now like to avail of this opportunity to thank the Government of Thailand for the warm welcome and hospitality accorded to all delegations. I would also like to request His Excellency General Thanasak Patima Pagragon, Deputy Prime Minister of Thailand, to deliver the inaugural address. Your Excellency, please.
Madam Executive Secretary, Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Royal Thai Government, I am very pleased to welcome all distinguished delegates and participants to Thailand. And I would like to take this opportunity to express on behalf of the government and the Thai people, our appreciation to the Executive Secretary, the President of the Commission, and all members states for your condolences and for paying tribute to His Majesty, the late King Bhumibol Adulyadej. The work of ESCAP echoes His Majesty's lifelong achievement, which is to promote people-centered and sustainable development. His Majesty, as we know, had devoted himself to improving people's lives through thousands of development projects. Sufficiency economy philosophy, one of His Majesty's legacies, stands out as a practical approach to sustainable development. Today, it is a strong foundation for Thailand and many countries to realize sustainable development goals. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me at the outset to extend my congratulations on 70th anniversary of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Let me also take this opportunity to reiterate that Thailand, as home of ESCAP, is committed to support and facilitate the work of ESCAP and the United Nations as a whole. Throughout 70 years of partnership, we have achieved remarkable success in economic growth and social development. However, a series of challenges such as inequality, irregular migration, climate change, natural and man-made disasters are daunting us today. Therefore, a regional cooperation facilitated by an intergovernmental platform such as ESCAP is vital to tackling these immense challenges. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, such challenges call for thought-through solutions based on a sustainability mindset and people-centered approach. Today, I wish to share with you some thoughts on the way forward. First, ESCAP can serve as a platform for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thailand, for example, is keen to share with other member states its experiences and practices of the sufficiency economy philosophy, which is a practical approach towards sustainable development. We have initiated the SEP4 SDGs partnership with more than 22 countries as friends of SEP. Second, sub-regional cooperation can contribute to the promotion of regional and international cooperation. Thailand, as ASEAN's coordinator with the UN on SDGs, has consistently worked with ESCAP to enhance complementarities between ASEAN Community Vision 2025 and the 2030 Agenda. Third, we attach importance to science, technology, and innovation as a key enabling factor for inclusive and sustainable development in the region. In our case, the policy of Thailand 4.0 is being pushed forward to transform the country into an innovative society. Fourth, ESCAP can make use of its location as a hub of the UN family in Asia and the Pacific to enhance coordination in order to ensure effective planning, monitoring, and flexibility in addressing the priorities and needs of the region. Last but not least, I would like to assure you that the Royal Thai government remains committed as ever to address regional development challenges. I thank you all for your kind attention. I wish you all a productive meeting and a pleasant stay in Thailand. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'd now like to invite His Excellency Mr. Tommy Remeng Sao, President of the Republic of Palau, to deliver his address to the Commission. Your Excellency, President, please.
Honorable Deputy Prime Minister of Thailand, Chair and Prime Minister of Tuvalu, Madam Executive Secretary, I see our good friend, Madam Helen Clark, former Administrator of UNDP, distinguished delegates to the 73rd session of ESCAP, ladies and gentlemen. Ali, and a very good afternoon to you all, and happy 70th anniversary to ESCAP. Not only is ESCAP an important partner for the Pacific, more importantly, it is the bridge builder that strengthens an important region, the Asia Pacific. Palau appreciates the support provided by the Secretariat to advance our national, regional, and multilateral priorities. Let me also thank, of course, the government of the Kingdom of Thailand for the wonderful welcome hospitality in this dynamic capital of Bangkok. Ladies and gentlemen, two of the most important priorities shared throughout the Pacific, which I want to quickly highlight, are the oceans and climate. For islands, the ocean is our lifeblood. It is the source of food, it is the source of our culture, and the bedrock upon which we build our economic development. Without healthy, productive, and resilient oceans, there is no well-being for our people. It is the reason the oceans are highlighted in the Samoa Pathway, the Framework for Pacific Regionalism, and the 2030 Agenda. But the ocean is critical to more than just islands. As captured by SDG 14, oceans are crucial to climatic and environmental stability, and our coasts and high seas are a central source of food and resources globally. In less than a month's time, we will meet in New York to try to implement the critical targets which we agreed in 2015 and to launch partnerships to take us forward. We need to meet these targets to do the most we can to protect the resources we depend on for our livelihoods and our economies. We need long-term sustainable fisheries, from small scale to commercial, for our very existence. We need the support for high-end ecotourism to build our sustainable development. We need to address marine pollution, to combat ocean acidification, and to create marine protected areas, including reserves, to ensure a healthy ocean on which we can rely for generations to come. In 2015, my country, Palau, passed a legislation to close 80% of our exclusive economic zone. Yes, folks, exactly the size of the great state of Texas. Over 600,000 square kilometers, and reserving 20% for domestic consumption. For Palau and the Pacific, the ocean is our life. It is our future. Fully protected marine reserves are key to rebuilding species through the spillover effects and protecting biodiversity both within and beyond national jurisdiction. A UN treaty to protect high seas biodiversity is an important step forward for protecting our common good and future, and we support the launch of this negotiation in New York this year. I call on all islands and countries globally to take leadership and action to protect and save our oceans, our fisheries, our high seas, and steward a new era of good governance for a sustainable planet. Let us show what we have always said. The oceans do not divide us, they bind us together in a common cause for all mankind. And together, we can advance the common cause of healthy oceans, healthy planet, and set the world on the right course. Palau stands with Fiji, Australia, and others to support the resolution in front of this Commission to support the UN Oceans Conference. Small islands, including the Pacific, led the push for a new legally binding climate treaty which culminated in the Paris Agreement. The momentum we built in the lead up to COP21 continued into 2016, with the agreement entering into force far more quickly than even the most optimistic had expected. The race to ratify was led once again by the small islands. At the core of the Paris Agreement are our nationally determined contributions, representing the efforts that every one of our countries has agreed to undertake to address climate change. The Pacific seats have among the most ambitious LDCs, which demonstrates just how seriously we take this new treaty. Palau itself is preparing to undertake a rapid transition to renewable energy. Full implementation of our NDC will put us on a course to be a renewable energy leader. Working with our partners, we expect to reduce emissions by half against business as usual in 2025 and meet 45% of our energy needs
with renewables. Adaptation also features prominently in our climate planning, particularly projects related to water security. After a historic drought last year that required severe rationing, improving the resilience of our water treatment, storage, and delivery systems have now become a national priority. These priorities are all consistent with the Samoa Pathway and the 2030 Agenda. However, we cannot accomplish this on our own. We need the full cooperation of our partners. This is essential, not only for the safety and well-being of the people of Palau, but for the Pacific and the Asia-Pacific region. It is also critical that we fully implement our NDCs to protect the credibility of the Paris Agreement itself. You see, at a time when some powerful countries seem ready to step back from their mitigation and financial commitments, it is even more essential for all of us to demonstrate the commitment among the rest of us. ESCAP and this Commission is an important platform for gathering support and for encouraging one another to more fully commit to a sustainable development for our children and their children. My delegation is indeed looking forward to a productive few days ahead and expect that this 73rd session of UN ESCAP will play an important role in strengthening our regional efforts in addressing the particular challenges faced by all of us, especially small, vulnerable island countries like Palau. Thank you very much for your attention this afternoon.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'd now like to invite Ms. Helen Clark, former Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme, to deliver her remarks. Madam, please.
Thank you, Mr. President of the 73rd session of the Commission, and warm congratulations to you and Tuvalu on your accession to this position. Can I also acknowledge the President of Palau, Prime Ministers, Deputy Prime Ministers, Ministers present, Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. And can I acknowledge too ESCAP's 70th anniversary year, and that it has worked from the very beginning to foster cooperation across the region in the interests of development. ESCAP has significant convening power, which brings us all together regularly, and so much policy and technical expertise. It is the go-to place for regional statistics and publishes such a wide range of expert reports on how to overcome the contemporary challenges faced by the Asia-Pacific, whether they be eradicating poverty, achieving gender equality, to making the shift to clean energy and sustainable water use, and adapting to climate change. And the Executive Secretary has touched on many of these matters in her address today. In my 8 years as Administrator at UNDP, we were very pleased to co-publish annual reports on regional Millennium Development Goal progress with ESCAP and the Asian Development Bank. And pursuant to an agreement signed 2 years ago, I know there will be similar cooperation around Sustainable Development Goals reporting from the three organisations. I've been asked in my statement today to address the links between peace, security and development. And the Executive Secretary, when she spoke, reminded us of where we've come from over the 70 years of ESCAP's existence on that score. Recognising those links is so much at the heart of the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs. And they are very blunt in saying that there isn't sustainable development without peace, and there isn't peace without sustainable development. The new UN Secretary-General, Mr. Guterres, has also placed conflict prevention and sustaining peace at the very top of his priorities. Yet at the start of this journey to implement Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, we find our world still preoccupied by a wide range of conflicts and significant tensions, including in this region. We are witnessing the world's largest ever displacement crisis. At more than 65 million people, this is greater than at the end of the Second World War. That crisis is impacting on this region as well. ESCAP, like the UN itself, was founded to help build a better world following the catastrophe of World War II. With the goodwill of member states, all UN organisations have worked across their range of mandates to build peace and prosperity. The recovery of the countries of East and Southeast Asia, which were ravaged by that Second World War and other wars, has contributed to making the Asia-Pacific the most dynamic economic region on Earth. Yet to date, not all countries in the region have been able to make the transition to an era of peace and prosperity. Insurgencies linger, displacement crises continue, and geopolitical tensions persist. In zones of conflict, there continues to be loss of life, poor services for people, and often not much hope either. Where there's conflict and/or tension, resources which could be devoted to development are spent on weapons. Meeting the needs of the displaced and others suffering the consequences of conflict is draining the resources of international partners away from longer-term development investment. Just setting out those consequences reminds us how vital it is to prevent conflict. Yet we all know that is not a short-term task. The seeds of conflict may lie in longer-term exclusion and discrimination, whether that be from economies, societies, or political systems. They may lie in lack of rule of law, weak institutions, and in resentment of arbitrary and unfair decisions. Today's conflicts also encompass violent extremism, which rallies followers across borders and fuels insurgencies and asymmetrical warfare. Youth who lack opportunity and are disengaged from society may become foot soldiers in such groups. If we focus on the root causes of such conflicts, we quickly appreciate that the solutions will lie in building the inclusive and sustainable societies envisaged by our 2030 agenda. If we could implement that agenda as a whole, focusing on decent work for all, education, health and other services, reducing inequalities, giving people voice in decisions which affect them, building tolerant and cohesive societies, and developing the capacities to mediate our differences, we could offer all peoples better prospects. For me, prevention of conflict within a country is in essence about inclusive development, in which everybody has a stake and a voice. There are no short-term fixes for peace. We need all partners to stay the course in supporting the climb out of poverty and despair. And these days there are many more partners. Beyond the valuable contributions of the traditional development partners, we're seeing such fast growth of cooperation initiatives at great scale emanating from the global south. In this region, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and China's Belt and Road Initiative are major examples of that. Conflict prevention must also encompass averting breakdowns of relationships between countries. This region is no stranger to cross-border tensions, and a number are of ongoing concern. In addressing these, a commitment to using all diplomatic means is vital. What complements that is the process of regional integration, which ESCAP has long encouraged and on which the region has made so much progress. ASEAN, formed 50 years ago, has been and is a major force for development and stability, and has championed wider groupings leading to the convening of the East Asia Summit. There is APEC, which spans the Pacific Ocean. There is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SARC, the Pacific Island Forum, and other regional organizations, all working to pull this region together around its shared and common interests. In conclusion, peace is so fundamental to sustained and sustaining development. Human development declines where there is conflict. Economies go into reverse gear. Infrastructure is destroyed. We all know that the remarkable progress of the Asia-Pacific in the past 70 years has been largely built on foundations of stability. Sustained peace is needed to meet the next generation of challenges too, the sustainable development challenges. I know that ESCAP and all UN organizations with a presence in the region will do whatever they can to support this region staying for the future, a zone of peace and prosperity. I wish you all the best for the 73rd session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam. I also need to thank the previous speaker, His Excellency Rami Remengso, the President of Palau, for his intervention and remarks. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'd now like to invite Her Excellency Ambassador Decima Williams, a special special advisor on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals to the President of the 71st session of the General Assembly to deliver her remarks. Your Excellency, please.
Excellency Mr. Enele Soponga, Prime Minister of Tuvalu and Chair of the 73rd session of the Commission, His Excellency Mr. Tommy Remegansu, President of Palau, His Excellency General Tamaski Patinamragon, Deputy Prime Minister of the Royal Government of Thailand, Ms. Shamshak Akhtar, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Ms. Helen Clark, ministers, leaders of delegations, excellencies all. Pleasant good afternoon to everyone. My deep condolences first to the government and people of Thailand on the loss of His Majesty the King. I also want to thank Thailand, the government, for your great hospitality afforded me since my arrival. I bring you greetings and apologies from President Thompson, who regrets he cannot be here. He extends his warm and strong appreciation to Dr. Akhtar for your leadership that you have provided the region, Madam, and to ESCAP itself for its singular body of work, strong and continuing engagement with the region. Congratulations on your 70th anniversary. President Thompson would have dearly loved to be here with the region's leaders and to be able to convey his respect and regards to all of you. I am honored. Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals have been designed as a 15-year commitment that all governments agreed to almost 2 years ago. And the goals aim to put in place a human and environmental response to eradicating poverty and to return dignity to people and planet. As such, the President of the United Nations General Assembly has made as a thrust of his presidency, making a push for the implementation of the SDGs is the centerpiece of his tenure. The United Nations has long recognized countries in special need, and this includes landlocked, least developed countries and small island developing states in the Pacific region. President Thompson comes from Fiji and has brought an acute sense of the region to his presidency. In the UN and around the world, General Assembly President has been engaging with leaders and stakeholders worldwide in order to provide the maximum support for the fulfillment of the goals. It is important to note that countries in special circumstance have unique attention in the UN system The Istanbul Declaration and Program of Action of 2011 addresses the special needs of the least developed countries, and the Samoa Pathway for Small Island Developing States 2014 addresses the special needs of the small island states, including those here in the Pacific region. Both these documents, which preceded Agenda 2030 by just a few years, called for the provision and financing for infrastructure development such as education, sustainable energy, water and sanitation, responses to climate change, and overall building resilience in the pursuit of productive, inclusive economies. Thus, the specific call within Agenda 2030 to build resilient infrastructure, which is the topic of my comments, and this agenda is SDG number 9, is fully supported within the UN body of commitments, and it remains important for the international community to support countries with special needs in improving and retaining their infrastructure. Infrastructure will play a critical role in enabling the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. According to a report by the New Climate Economy, we are currently facing a historic window of opportunity to make the transition towards sustainable infrastructure due to historically low interest rates, rapid technological change, and a large pool of capital invested in low-yield investments. In fact, close to $11 trillion are currently invested in negative-yielding bonds, which are now available then for new investments in infrastructure. We keep in mind, developing countries account for close to 2/3 of the demand for financing and creating infrastructure, and these countries are the ones that face the largest financing gaps. We keep in mind that this involves not only physical infrastructure, of course, such as roads, bridges, airports, and so on, but also natural infrastructures such as forests, wetlands, and pastures. Now, sustainable infrastructure connects all and makes possible the achievement of all the SDGs. Strong, durable, and resilient physical infrastructure creates conditions for sustainable economic growth, increases in productivity, and decent work for all. And finance and innovation, including innovative financing, can best facilitate the necessary scale, urgency, and inclusivity of participation, as well as have low impact on the environment. Because the vision of the SDGs is to leave no one behind, and that people must be placed at the heart of sustainability, sustainable infrastructure must meet the needs of the over 1 billion in the Asia-Pacific region impacted by absent or inadequate infrastructure, including in public and private buildings, transportation and cities, and in resilience building to climatic events. His Excellency President Thompson has conveyed this message during his attendance at Habitat 3 in Quito, Ecuador last October, and has just returned from Nairobi in attendance of Habitat Governing Council's meeting, where he again supported policies designed to pursue the creation, innovation, and implementation of resilient physical infrastructure. Clearly, his commitment continues. The Asia-Pacific region is experiencing dramatic growth and transformation towards sustainability, as we have heard from the Executive Secretary, as a result of the achievement of many of the countries where absolute poverty rates have fallen and infrastructure gains are growing. Yet, this is still a region with large concentrations of poverty, social exclusion, especially of women and minority groups. It is a region beset by monsoons, typhoons, and devastating hurricanes on small island developing states, as we know. Only 13 years ago, the tsunami took over 300,000 lives. But in this region, this great Asia-Pacific region, there is a great surge of resilience, a great fount of young talent. And the region is clearly in need of sustainable development and is pursuing it as it boldly faces this century. The region must therefore be complemented for a strong response already to the SDGs. In the interest of time, let me just mention 3 quick areas for infrastructure and broader SDG achievement. Sustainable energy, it's an indisputable key element of sustainable infrastructure for the region and can also be, can serve as a catalyst and driver for the achievement of all the other SDGs. The green energy movement, very strong here in the Asia-Pacific region, with leading roles played by such bodies as the Sustainable Energy for All and UNIDO with its CREEP program, can literally clean light a path to productive investments in a wide range of wide areas in where youth and women can derive opportunities for increased entrepreneurship. A second area is in transportation and livable cities. And the President has participated in the unveiling of a plan at a regional meeting in Turkmenistan last November, as well as in August he will engage with mayors from around the world who will gather to promote the transformation of cities as hubs of coexistence of people, economy, and environment to a greater degree than they are today. Attention has to be given to cities for women's safety as it is for commerce, for decent housing for the poor, as it is for efficient transportation ports. And the third area is climate-resilient infrastructure. As sea level rises and climate events become larger, less predictable, and more costly, sea defense walls are becoming woefully inadequate. Rather, it is an entirely new approach to infrastructure and consumption and production patterns, particularly in carbon-intense countries far from here, that will turn the tide towards security for SIDS, coastal communities, and whole economies. This will require clean energy factories, low-carbon agriculture and food production, more green lifestyles and waste disposal, to name a few. In sum, Mr. President, in putting in place a modern, low-carbon, people-friendly, sustainable finance infrastructure across the Asia-Pacific region undoubtedly can occur and can simultaneously achieve other SDGs, such as SDG 8, decent work and employment, economic growth, systems efficiency, economies of scale, and the overall transition to an expanding, sustainable world. How to finance such a movement, how to bring the international community on board. I will abbreviate this section, have many suggestions, but suffice it to say that there is a need for a wide variety of stakeholders in this endeavor so that we can underscore the need for financing and other means of implementation in the form of private-public partnerships, education and awareness raising, and of course, creative thinking, for which this region is very well known. What you are doing here is a tremendous support to the region here in ESCAP by not only highlighting its needs in Agenda 2030 and supporting it, but in its strong and committed leadership for the journey, which has already begun. ESCAP, Mr. Chairman, is a complete friend of the region. The international community does have a vital role to play, first by meeting the official development assistance and climate action commitments that have been undertaken. While these will be far from enough to meet the numbers outlined above, they will signal the commitment of rich nations to help others. Furthermore, international public finance, be it through ODA, climate action, or the work of the multilateral development banks, can be used to build capacities in developing countries, transfer technologies, as well as leverage private resources to bring investments to scale. Let me close my remarks by saying that on the 28th of, that this very day on the 17th of May, President is hosting an innovation session at the United Nations, which follows on the heels of a session a few days ago on financing for sustainable development. On the 28th of June, the President will host a high-level event on education, which will help in strengthening our support for human capacity building for a sustainable future. And finally, as has already been said by His Excellency, the President of Palau, I bring to your attention that in 21 days from now, the President will host, along with Sweden and Fiji, the Ocean Conference, pushing forward on SDG 14. Please go online and register voluntary commitments to support restoring the health of the oceans. Log on and continue to support the work of a resilient and strong infrastructure for the oceans and for the planet. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Ambassador Williams, for your remarks. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, this Commission session also coincides with the 70th anniversary of the establishment of ESCAP by the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations via Resolution E/Res/37 bracketed Roman 4 of 28 March 1947. This anniversary affords us an opportunity to reflect, to look back on its history, and to take stock of the enduring achievements achieved by our member states and ESCAP. I also hope it serves as inspiration for us to work even harder to bring prosperity to all of the peoples of Asia and the Pacific, and to do so in an equitable and sustainable manner. It is now, therefore, my pleasure to draw your attention to the screens for video commemorating and celebrating the 7 decades of connecting Asia and the Pacific.
The Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific celebrates its 70th anniversary. Home to 70% of the world's population, rich in its diversity across cultures, religions, and societies, Asia-Pacific has grown into a vital center of global economic development. Dynamic and transformative in its outlook, the region has seen peace and stability take root and has earned its place in the forefront of the battle against endemic poverty. Much of the success experienced today can be attributed to the strong political will and strategic actions taken by countries toward achieving regional prosperity focused in the economic and social integration. First established in Shanghai in 1947 as the Economic Commission for Asia and the Far East, ECAFE, the regional body aimed to bring to the doorstep of the developing nations the multiple benefits of the Industrial Revolution while narrowing the divide between rich industrialized countries and poor agrarian economies. Founded by 10 members, the organization today headquartered in Bangkok has steadily grown over the years and today can count 53 nations and 9 associate members as part of the grouping.
As host country of ESCAP here, Thailand is honored to support and facilitate ESCAP's work in bringing about the social and economic progress in Asia Pacific. We highly appreciate ESCAP's leading role today in promoting sustainable development in Asia and Pacific.
Initially charged with the task of undertaking rigorous research on economic issues and providing member countries with informed advice, the most immediate challenge, however, for the Commission was to identify priority actions for economic reconstruction. The Economic Survey of the Far East, today known as the Annual Economic and Social Survey of Asia and the Pacific, was published for the first time in 1948. This major publication is a reference for member states that provides them with research and analysis in economic and financial trends. The Commission has evolved over the years, becoming the leading intergovernmental platform to promote technical cooperation, economic growth, and social equity. Research and analysis continue to be the backbone of our work.
The Commission is a critical part of the work of ESCAP, mainly because we are an intergovernmental forum. So this is the place where the governments would come together, they would assemble, they would discuss, they would form consensus, and also make decisions in terms of what is it they would take on.
By successfully combining research and analysis, its convening ability and its technical expertise, ESCAP has contributed to the creation of a number of defining institutions and agreements. A standout among these achievements has been the role that ESCAP played in the creation of the Asian Development Bank, initiated by ECAFE in 1966.
I want to express my deep appreciation for the close collaboration between ESCAP and ADB in supporting poverty reduction and economic development in the region. Let's continue to work together.
Over the years, we have built strong alliances with partners to effectively deliver on our mandate.
The relationship has been mutually beneficial, serving the agenda and the purposes of both, and certainly serving the region very, very well.
These partnerships have enabled us to draw on a wide range of technical expertise to do more for member countries.
UNESCAP has also helped Pakistan in many ways. There are some projects from which Pakistan has helped directly, like projects in the area of solid waste management, projects in the area of agriculture, projects in the area of sustainable development. We have also indirectly benefited from UNESCAP's regional initiatives like Asia-Pacific Information Superhighway, Trans-Asia Railway Network.
It has given us the opportunity to get into a trade agreement, facilitate trade agreements, especially where, as I told you, when we are a gateway to South Asia, you need access to markets around your country.
ESCAP gives stronger participation to the smaller and often left out voices of the region, the least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small islands developing states, and supports them, taking in mind their own characteristics.
For closer relationship and close association with ESCAP in assisting the people of the Pacific, especially the small Pacific Island developing states in forging ahead with the huge challenges to climate change and the ocean.
Ну, как раз таки именно в плане развития, так скажем, в социальном развитии влияние эската. Мы также видим влияние эската именно как раз таки в проведении политики каких-то комплексов мер по обеспечению прав и улучшению качества жизни лиц с ограниченными возможностями здоровья.
But the path towards success has not been without its challenges. The Commission has faced its own challenges, but these have been overcome with vision and sheer determination.
The Asian financial crisis of 1997, because the fallout was felt globally. It started in Bangkok, of course, in Thailand, under the instruction of the Secretary General of the UN at that time, Mr. Kofi Annan, who just came in also in 1997. ESCAP managed to come up with several policy prescriptions to counteract the effect of the crisis.
The feedback of regional perspectives to the global discussions is one of the challenging tasks. MDGs were just launched, followed by the large-scale UN conferences, all required regional inputs, regional perspectives. So the Commission organized regional preparatory meeting and successfully provided regional opinions and policy suggestions to the global discussions.
With almost 600 professional and local staff working in the headquarters in Bangkok, as well as in the sub-regional offices. The mission of the Commission is a collective effort.
The lesson I have learned in my 25 years of working with ESCAP is that ESCAP works best when it is able to combine these three modalities. Yeah? When it's able to combine its research and analysis with its intergovernmental work, and then combine its intergovernmental work with its technical cooperation, and do it in an iterative fashion. Whenever ESCAP has done that, right, and whenever it has taken advantage of its multi-sectoral nature, it has worked the best.
In my case, working on disability issues for the last 15 years, we also continue to have our own regional mandate on disability.
So working with ESCAP is a great way to contribute your skill and experience in challenging international environments and help solve global problems and improve the lives of people in communities around the world.
Over the 70 years, it has been a journey that the Commission can be proud of. Much has been accomplished, but we recognize that much more needs to be done if we are to achieve the ambitious targets set out in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Reducing poverty, empowering girls and women, education for all, clean energy, climate change, building resilience to natural disasters, promoting science, technology and innovation, and better connectivity. Let's take this opportunity to remind ourselves how much we can get done when we work together with one common purpose.
Over the past 70 years, ESCAP, to its credit, has delivered a body of normative policy work supported by treaties, legal and regulatory frameworks, and offering the needed capacity building. This has served to enhance regional cooperation and integration, deal with social dimensions, including our commitment to promote gender equality, and provide a framework for disability. It has promoted trade and investment through analytical work, calling for free trade, among others, through supporting the removal of tariff and non-tariff barriers, and much more. Building on this work, ESCAP has proven to be an agile institution, which has restructured and reinvented itself, while building its capacities to support the implementation of the Global 2030 Agenda and its means of implementation. More recently, our membership has agreed to a regional roadmap for the implementation of 2030 Agenda, which the regional United Nations Development System will collectively support. We have galvanized world-leading experts to operationalize Asia-Pacific Advisory Body on Tax and Expenditure Management, and Science, Technology and Innovation, as well as to uplift our statistical capacities for the SDGs. Given the enormous future potential of the Asia-Pacific region, ESCAP's strategy will be to raise the productivity and competitiveness of the region and ensure its development pathway is steered by sustainable development, securing economic, social, and environmental gains for all countries. ESCAP is guided by the promise of the 2030 Agenda to leave no one behind in its approach to its work. We will continue to focus efforts on countries with special needs and to ensure that the benefits of sustainable development reach the poorest and most vulnerable in society. I'm really proud to be an ESCAP citizen today.
Surely there's a lot of inspiration we could draw out from the video, and thank you, delegations, leaders of members of ESCAP for your leadership, and officials and experts. And as the video shows, the job is not yet done, so that to ensure no one is left behind. Let's also continue to give our support to ESCAP Executive Secretary and her staff. Colleagues, at this time, I want to invite all heads of delegations for photograph taking. The place will be shown to us by our officials. But could I kindly ask you that we reconvene in this conference room after our photos, and I understand a short break, for a high-level exchange of the special body on least developed, landlocked developing, and Pacific Island developing countries. Please, you are welcome back. Thank you. The meeting is now suspended. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I kindly request that the remaining distinguished participants remain in your seats for just a few moments to allow special guests and heads of delegations to proceed to the group photo. As a reminder, the head of delegations are kindly requested to assemble for the group photograph. The photograph is being taken in front of Conference Room 1.
Can I call the meeting to order, please? Thank you. Could delegates kindly take their seats, please, so we can get the dialogue off, as we don't have much time. And thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I now call the meeting to order. We shall continue our consideration of Agenda Item 2 on the Special Body on Least Developed, Landlocked, Developing and Pacific Island Developing Countries. As you know, the LDCs, LLDCs and PIDCs had extensive discussions during the session, the senior official segment on Tuesday. The purpose of the high-level exchange is to examine the progress and challenges related to sustainable development faced by Asian Pacific countries with special needs. In particular, we would like to pay special attention to the issue of development and maintenance of physical infrastructure as crucial catalysts of development. The ESCAP Secretariat has prepared a report on infrastructure development in the countries with special needs, which identifies the group-specific predicaments and recommends the way forward, and it is summarized in document E/ESCAP/73/5. This high-level exchange aims to contribute to the sharing of experiences on national and regional strategies in this regard. But before we get our high-level exchange, may I invite the Executive Secretary to introduce the findings of the report as summarized in document E/ESCAP/73/5. Executive Secretary, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to the high-level exchange of the special body on the countries with special needs, and to share with you some of the main findings of this year's report. I'd at the outset like to thank the colleagues who have been involved in the preparation of this report. It's never easy to do a CSN report given the issues of data. Our focus this year has been investing in infrastructure for an inclusive and sustainable future. This is a theme which flows out of our previous analysis on bolstering productive capacity and integrating the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development into national development plans, and I referred to it during my opening statement also. The 2030 Agenda Sustainable Development Goal 9 focuses on promoting investment in sustainable infrastructure, the benefits of which, as you will agree, are uncontested. Upgrading old and building new infrastructure, of course, increases productivity, growth, competitiveness, and if done intelligently, supports social development. In the short term, building new infrastructure can boost demand and employment through construction work. In the long term, it helps to keep growth sustainable, and the academic consensus in this field, as you'll agree, is overwhelming. Infrastructure, growth, and poverty reduction, of course, goes hand in hand. Excuse me. Improved access to infrastructure, of course, empowers rural areas, connects people to markets, and can support climate change adaptation and mitigation. Each country has its, of course, own set of vulnerabilities, but through our analysis, we have identified common challenges which a multilateral approach could overcome. Least developed countries need to expand their productive capacities and increase their levels of social and economic development while equitably sharing the benefits. The landlocked countries need to overcome the disadvantages of being landlocked, which inhibit their ability to engage with the global economy. By expanding trade, intensifying production networks, and accelerating investment in transport, ICT, and energy infrastructure, these countries can become land-linked. Small island states face significant challenges, as you will appreciate, due to their small size and lack of economic diversification, which limits economies of scale. An earlier report of ours had gone into this issue of economic diversification. Geographical fragmentation and isolation and the existential threat of the impact of climate change are the biggest challenges in these islands, requiring the collective effort of international community. To capture the multidimensional character of infrastructure, ESCAP has created the Access to Physical Infrastructure Index, which focuses on 4 sectors of physical infrastructure: transport, energy, ICT, and water and sanitation. The Access to Physical Infrastructure Index has been calculated by a team for 41 countries in the Asia-Pacific region, including 23 countries with special needs. It confirms the significant infrastructure deficits of these countries. If infrastructure excess in CSN were increased to the level of other developing countries in the region, by 2030, their combined GDP would increase by as much as 134 billion, or 6%. So the power of infrastructure has been quite evident from this estimation that our team has pulled together. Let me say a few words about the challenges in the 4 areas of infrastructure which our report has examined. Starting with transport, road density, as we will appreciate, is low in countries, in CSN countries, particularly in large countries such as Kazakhstan and Mongolia. In many CSNs, only a small proportion of roads are paved and maintenance is underfunded. Many CSNs only spend 20 to 50% of what is needed to maintain their road network. The efficiency of rail transport in these countries is held back by different technical standards across the region, as well as by multiple missing links in rail infrastructure, which prevent the railway network functioning as a continuous system. Our team has again estimated that some 11,000 kilometers of missing links in the Trans-Asian Railway network, or 9% of the existing network. Only 60% of these missing links, totaling some 7,500 kilometers, are in CSN countries, in CSNs. Let me turn to energy sector. The principal issues facing CSNs is limited energy access, as about 45% of the population in CSNs, or 150 million people, do not have access to electricity. Provision of electricity, as I discussed this morning, is a fundamental need, and its positive correlation to the Human Development Index, a composite measure of life expectancy, education, and per capita, are striking. There are also profound differences between CSNs in terms of energy access. 7 of the 12 landlocked developing countries in the region have achieved universal electricity access, although many of the least developed countries have made progress through grid extensions and decentralized electricity provision over the past 2 decades. In most of them, less than 60% of the population has access to electricity. Small island states, particularly those in the least developed category, have also struggled to lift electrification rates. As island economies, they face additional challenges of fragmentation, lack of scale, and isolation, which inhibit the provision of power generation and transmission infrastructure. However, with right support, the development of small-scale decentralized power options based on renewable energy can surmount many of these challenges. Many of the Pacific Island states have put in place ambitious renewable energy targets, as we heard this morning, which are building scale and increasing experience in renewable power solutions. Let me turn to ICT. In ICT spearheading, technology could accelerate human progress significantly. Mobile technology could improve the way public services such as health and education are delivered via e-health applications and e-learning platforms. Telecommunication infrastructure is an essential driver of effective governance in countries with thinly spread and isolated population. Broadband-enabled technologies such as smart grids or intelligent transport systems are just some of the efficient approaches that drive growth in all sectors of the economy. A good broadband network could underpin the movement of goods, services, people, and money across countries. Yet, internet access is low in many CSNs. There are fewer than 5 broadband subscription per 100 inhabitants in 2015, although most landlocked countries perform better. As well as investment, a supportive regulatory environment in this area needs to be developed across all CSNs to support ICT development. Access to clean water and safe disposal of waste, the fourth area that I promised to talk about, is the focus of the Sustainable Development Goal 6. It is crucial to improving social well-being. Only 53% of the people in rural areas in landlocked developing countries and 56% of rural areas in least developed countries have access to clean water. So we have some miles to go on this. I would add that rapid urbanization is placing, of course, an additional strain on water supply and sanitation infrastructure, which in turn highlights another challenge, as the local governments responsible frequently do not have a power of financial wherewithal to respond effectively. Indeed, closing these infrastructure gaps will require significant financial resources. The study estimates that taking population growth, increasing urbanization, and the impact of climate change into account, CSNs will require average annual investments equivalent to 10.5% of GDP. As you'll appreciate, this far exceeds current infrastructure funding, which in the best scenario could be anywhere between 5 to 7% of GDP. These needs are particularly acute in small island least developed countries. Timor-Leste has 21.1% of GDP and Kiribati 14.4% of GDP. And in landlocked least developed countries such as Afghanistan, 18.5% of GDP, and Nepal, another example, 15.7% of GDP. So we have a long way to go. As you will appreciate, we are trying to exploit financing for development platform. And on the revenue side, the tax collection is too low. Previously, an 18% tax to GDP ratio is estimated to be needed in developing countries for the Millennium Development Goals to be met. But in 13 out of the 17 CSNs for which data was available, the ratios are well below the level. There's a lot of work that countries need to do, like getting the policy policy environment right, improving the institutional governance for project execution. There's got to be respect for property rights and the rule of law in order to ensure benefits of infrastructure are shared by all. So with this background on the broader challenges highlighted by our report, the purpose of this high-level exchange is to, one, identify in further detail the opportunities associated with infrastructure development, such as prioritization, cross-sectoral coordination, and institutional capacity for implementing projects and ensuring sustainable and effective use of infrastructure. Two, understanding the challenges and opportunities at the national level for financing infrastructure, including through mobilizing domestic public finance as well as enhancing private sector participation and public-private partnerships. And three, of course, discussing the future role of development assistance and cooperation in developing regional infrastructure such as large transport corridors and information superhighway. The outcome of this panel discussion will contribute to national and regional strategies for infrastructure development and the implementation of the SDGs in Asia Pacific. While we do not have a tradition to launch such reports at the country or the sub-regional level, but given the richness of the findings of this report, I am going to be requesting our sub-regional offices to make sure that they make an effort to disseminate the findings of this report, particularly the recommendations on how to uplift the infrastructure in the CSN countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary. Excellencies, it is now my pleasure to invite to the rostrum His Excellency Mr. Tommy Remengesau, President of Palau, to be the moderator of this high-level exchange. Also to invite our special panel of speakers to take their seats in the rostrum. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I think we are ready now to start our high-level exchange panel on the important topic of infrastructure development, maintenance, and financing among Asia-Pacific countries with special needs. Indeed, we are privileged today to have a group of distinguished officials and experts who I may say represent government, private sector, international organizations, and geographically small island developing states, least developed countries, and landlocked developing countries. On my immediate right is seated the Honorable Mr. Joe Natuman, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Trade of Vanuatu. And my immediate left is the Honorable Send Mang Orgil, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mongolia. To the left is the Honorable Mohammed Abdul Menan, Minister of State, Ministry of Finance, and Ministry of Planning, Bangladesh. And on the right, we have heard her earlier, Ms. Decima Williams, Special Advisor on SDG implementation to the President of the General Assembly. And of course, on my far left is Mr. Rajiv Biswas, Senior Director and Asia Pacific Chief Economist, IHS Markit, Singapore. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to this panel. We have heard the Executive Secretary give an overview of the importance of this particular subject area. So without further ado, let us go to the panelists. I do notice that we are running behind on our time. And so if I would ask the panelists to limit their statements to maybe 5 minutes, but certainly no more than 8 minutes, and summarize what it is that we have, you have written or have brought to the table. Honorable Deputy Prime Minister, sir, if we could start with you. You, like myself, is a representative of Pacific Islands. And Vanuatu is not only a member of Small Islands Developing States Group, but also of the group of least developed countries. This puts your country in a rather special needs position, as its development, or perhaps even the survival, is critically affected by external factors that are beyond her control. Adequate infrastructure development, then, is one of the most pressing issues for development. Could you please, sir, single out the particular predicament of Pacific Islands and of Vanuatu in infrastructure development? And in your opinion, how does the Samoa pathway help in dealing with infrastructural challenges? What are your expectations from the international community and UNESCAP in particular in reference to improving infrastructure in Pacific Small Island developing states? It's a mouthful, sir, but please share those thoughts on this.
Thank you. Thank you very much, moderator. I shall try to be brief within the period allocated. And as you know, as you mentioned, Vanuatu is a least developed country in the Pacific. And we are supposed to be graduating in 2020. And therefore, we are a least developed country, and as not a landlocked, but a sea-locked country as well. I think that's a new term. Vanuatu is spread over about 83 islands, covering about 83 islands, a population of about 280,000, and about 75% live in the rural areas out in the islands. About 25% live in the city or in the main urban centers. So this presents a predicament for us because you have to provide infrastructure, particularly roads in all those little islands, over about 80 or so little islands, building roads, building bridges or jetties or wharf, airstrips to allow planes to go to these remote islands in case of people want to travel to the cities or to evacuate people who are sick to the medical centers. So this is the issue. In the Pacific, we have some islands, probably 2 or 3 islands, big islands, for example, Samoa. So they are concentrated on 2 main islands. In Vanuatu, we have to concentrate on over 80 islands. So this is the problem. This presents a big problem for us, not only in terms of costs, but also in terms of maintenance. So these are the issues. And of course, we know the importance of infrastructure in terms of social benefits, as well as economic and investment benefits. So infrastructure development is essential for us. And of course, with also limited finance resources, we look for support overseas, particularly from our development partners, mainly in our region, Australia, New Zealand, and the European Union, through their development assistance to the region. So we have, and of course, China. We have relations with the People's Republic of China, which they provide us with a lot of infrastructure assistance, either in grant or in loan form, soft loans, and also with the government of Japan, which they provide us with a lot of assistance. They are now currently providing assistance to upgrade our main wharf in Port Vila to be able to cater for large container boats. So we are grateful for this to development partners in providing us with this. I think in terms of, as mentioned, you mentioned, Mr. President, moderators, the area of some more pathways, Vanuatu has launched its own national development plan, of the People's Plan, 2016 to 2030, and of course infrastructure is prominently featured in this development plan. Vanuatu 2030 plan charts the country's vision and overarching policy framework in achieving a stable, sustainable and prosperous Vanuatu within the next 15 years, and in doing so sets out the national priorities and context for the implementation of the national global sustainable development goals over the same period. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, or SAMO pathway, and framework for Pacific regionalism are inherently aligned and premise on addressing the interlinked and indivisible economic, social, and environmental pillars of sustainable development, together with the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, Addis Ababa Action Agenda, and the Paris Agreement on climate change. They offer up a new development paradigm with renewed opportunities for achieving sustainable development in the Pacific. Prevailing and emerging regional priorities include the following: climate change and disaster risk reduction, oceans and fisheries, infrastructure for affordable and clean energy and connectivity, health, especially non-communicable diseases, empowering women and girls and people with disabilities. However, a supported infrastructure asset is largely failing to provide the services for which they were intended, primarily because assets are provided inadequate resources for operation and maintenance once they are deployed. Indeed, maintaining and operating assets needs to be accorded a higher priority than expanding the asset base. Therefore, critical challenges for developing public infrastructure in Vanuatu are the following: making infrastructure sustainable by systematically identifying operations and maintenance requirements and resourcing them, integrating infrastructure planning into routine public administration processes for more transparency, alignment with evolving government policy and strategic priorities, and providing a framework to guide developing partners' support for future infrastructure development. How international communities can improve infrastructure in the Pacific Island developing states. Vanuatu has one of the highest level of aid per capita in the world. Aid funds accounted for at least 25% of government capital investment. An increasingly proportion of funds is being managed and reported to the Government Development Fund. As previously indicated, the poor quality, low reliability, and high cost of basic infrastructure in Vanuatu remains a major constraint on broad-based economic growth and poverty reduction. Because of its small size, the country has difficulty generating sufficient internal revenue to finance infrastructure construction and maintenance required to support the delivery of basic services. Thus, the vast majority of new capital investment in infrastructure in recent years has occurred with development partners funding. Donor partners or agencies play an important role in the infrastructure development of many developing countries. This may be through budgetary support, project or program, and technical and financial assistance and building capacity building. Donor partners and international communities can support the infrastructure development by aligning with the national priorities and policies, structures, principles, and processes already established by governments. Donors can also engage in emphasizing ownership, alignment, harmonization, managing for results, and mutual accountability, and which integrate commitments made in the Paris Declaration on Aid Effectiveness and the Accra Agenda for Action. Donor roles and responsibility at country level should also focus on basically 5 scenarios: ownership, alignment, harmonization, managing for result, and mutual accountability. This is Paris Declaration on Aid Effectiveness and the Accra Agenda Action. Allow me to list some specific role for donor partners and agencies which we think it is good in assisting us in promoting infrastructure development in Vanuatu or Pacific small island developing countries for that matter. 1, support government leadership and ownership in infrastructure development that are based on inclusive process, promoting effective participation of key infrastructure stakeholders. 2, support capacity development of key stakeholders and the institution to participate more effectively in the design, delivery, and monitoring of infrastructure development. 3, focus on alignment with national infrastructure development strategies and country systems that are good enough, strongly considering the decentralized government institution. 4, support the strengthening of the internal coherence of policies. 5, support consensus building on the role of government and civil society or private sector in infrastructure. 6, use and support national development strategies, joint assistance strategies in infrastructure sector policies, and common funding mechanism via sector-wide and program-based approaches to bring about harmonization. 7, recognize the need for intra- and intersectoral harmonization in rural development. And lastly, 8, join with partners to promote and develop sector-level mutual accountability framework, which need to include roles for stakeholders. Mr. Moderator, I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister of Vanuatu, for sharing those points with us. Again, if I could remind everyone, we're really kind of behind on our scheduled time, so if we can just summarize what it is that you have on your written statements so that we can get to everybody and without further delay. Minister Cheng Mung Orkil, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mongolia. Minister, Mongolia is a landlocked country, but at the same time with abundant natural resources. Mongolia is placed between the region's largest economies, the Russian Federation and China. While we are all aware of the predicaments of landlocked developing countries, particularly their remoteness from global markets, it is also true that Mongolia has moved forward in improving connectivity with its neighbors and is in the process of building significant infrastructure corridors. Sir, could you please discuss Mongolia's challenges related to infrastructure development and maintenance, and how, in your contribution, will the Belt and Road Initiative and the creation of an economic corridor between Russia, Mongolia, and China improve the development prosperity prospects of Mongolia?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I know we are pressed for time, but I have to begin by congratulating the ESCAP on the 70th anniversary of its establishment. And ESCAP has been critically and pivotally important for Mongolia's social and economic development. It provided a helping hand at times of Mongolia's transition to the market economy. It helped us to build our human resources. And I think on behalf of the government and people of Mongolia, I would once again congratulate ESCAP and its dedicated staff for the work well done. Turning to your question of Mongolia's challenges, being landlocked is one of the single most important economic handicaps that prevents Mongolia from utilizing fully its enormous economic and natural resource potential. We have calculated that the cost of trading with the rest of the world for Mongolian companies and for Mongolian state-owned enterprises, only 5 to 10% of the cost of doing business comes on the account of tariffs. The rest, 90%, are non-tariff barriers. Specifically, 40% of the trade costs comes from issues, such non-tariff issues like customs clearance, connectivity issues, and the remaining 50%, in other words, half of the cost of doing business for Mongolia is related to its being landlocked, and most importantly, transportation, and even more important than simple transportation, it is the transit transportation problems for Mongolian companies in goods to go from Mongolia through Russia and China to the ports to reach the third countries that we want to trade. It's calculated that on average, the landlocked developing countries like Mongolia have to incur from 25 to 40% more in terms of the costs and bureaucratic burden to overcome the problems of landlockedness. It is true that we've been working with our two big neighbors, Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China, to overcome these difficulties. Last month, at the end of the last year, for example, we have signed a trilateral transit arrangement between Mongolia, Russia, and China. Now we are waiting the soon promised ratification of the similar agreement between Mongolia and China just on the railway transportation. And here I cannot overemphasize the important role that ESCAP and the United Nations Office for High Representative for Landlocked Developing Countries and Least Developing Countries in SEEDS has done to help us to build the capacity to negotiate these important agreements. Because without these agreements, and without the help of qualified personnel from international organizations like ESCAP and UN, it is very difficult for small developing countries to negotiate critically important technical agreements with big neighbors. And of course, the recent coming into effect of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement is a very welcome boost in developing Mongolia's connectivity. Coming to the needs for financial, for funding for infrastructure development, the 2017 development report for Asia Pacific countries with special needs emphasizes the availability of ODA, private-public partnerships, and the need to mobilize domestic resources. But I have to say that for small developing countries, in particular small developing landlocked countries like Mongolia, all these resources, ODA, PPA, and domestic resource mobilizations are not nearly enough to address the large infrastructure funding needs. This report, for example, pinpoints that Mongolia has one of the lowest density of road coverage in the whole Asia-Pacific area. Mainly has to do with enormous territory, 1.5 million square kilometers, and the enormous distances that the bulk of the commodity bulk products has to cover from the place of origin to the markets of consumption. And I have to say that Belt and Road Initiative that you've just mentioned, and on which a big summit was just held a few days ago in Beijing, provides probably the most realistic opportunity for small countries like Mongolia to find the much needed funding for infrastructure development. And together with presidents of Russia and the president of China, Mongolian president has signed last year a big program, a big ambitious program to set up a trilateral economic corridor running from central parts of Russia through Mongolia to the central parts of China, covering high voltage transmission lines, railways, pipelines, highways, and we are working with our two neighbors to make this project a reality. And here I want to emphasize once again the role that organizations like ESCAP and its professional staff can help small countries like Mongolia to negotiate and maneuver through very difficult terrain of finding optimal solutions, technical, legal, and political solutions to these projects of enormous size and repercussions. And this morning I met Madam Executive Secretary, and I made it very clear that it's not the funding, it's not the money that countries like ours are looking to get from ESCAP. It's the resources in terms of technical knowledge, expertise, capacity building that we would be looking to benefit the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Orgil, for sharing those insights with us, and especially for staying within the allotted time to. All right. Minister Mohammed Abdul Manan, Minister of State, Ministry of Finance, and Ministry of Planning, Bangladesh. Sir, Bangladesh belongs to the group of least developed countries. At the same time, its economy has been growing rapidly, and the state has focused some of its activities at strengthening social cohesion. Undoubtedly, for a country with a history of significant natural disasters, Bangladesh development depends on a number of factors, including infrastructure and its financing. Could you explain what you think are the best instruments to finance physical construction, infrastructure development, and maintenance in Bangladesh and other least developed countries of the Asia-Pacific region?
Thank you, sir. I wish to thank everyone here in the room, particularly the distinguished panelists here, including ministers from some of the colleague countries. Let me begin by once again thanking ESCAP for another round of very fruitful discussions and get-togethers, and also to share some of our experiences with everyone around here. We also would like to thank the Royal Government of Thailand for its hospitality and warm friendship. Sir, as you have said, Bangladesh is a less developed country. Of course, it's still technically, but then again, we are pleased to tell you we are right at the door of being in the middle-income country. we have probably moved into the lower end of the middle rank and should be able to be formally inducted into the middle income country by beginning of sometime in the next UNGA session. As you have rightly said, our growth has been quite impressive, and the difficulty that we face are nothing new. Almost every other country has faced it in the past, and other LDCs also face it. In the face of that, as you have said, we did in the past, or even now, from time to time, face natural disasters. But then we are very fortunate in that we have a very robust export growth over the years, particularly in the textile sectors. And we have about 10 million people working abroad in the richer countries who send us money home. These two factors, plus the resilient agriculture in the last decade or so, these three factors together have combined to build a sort of an acceleration which has brought us here today. This year, I'm happy to tell you, only a day before yesterday, our Ministry of Planning has published the figures that we are going to be reaching 7.24 growth rate this year. And we hope we'll be able to break this range of 7 and reach into 8 in the next 2 or 3 years. So as you have said, what are the difficulties we face? Well, number one is, of course, the finances. But much more important is probably planning, knowing what we have to do. There are a lot of money going around. People do offer us money at various rates, and we can borrow as much as we want. But we are scared that we could be over-borrowing and losing our head. So we're very careful about that. We have a group of people who are in the Planning Commission who are looking at various draft projects submitted by various ministries in the government, particularly in the infrastructure section, the road building. Here, sir, we have a very typical, peculiar sort of watery, if not landlocked, waterlocked almost. We have hundreds and thousands of rivers, small rivers and streams, and we have monsoon floodings. And our land is basically silt land, which is built by the Ganges and big Brahmaputra rivers. So these are very soft land structure, and building and maintaining roads there and bridges is very difficult. It's not like in Mongolia, the hard rocky ground, you could just lay out your tractors and make a road or something. So in that score, our government, particularly the present government of Sheikh Hasina, our Prime Minister, we have given highest priority to road building, because we feel that in order to be able to take everyone on board, we have to reach there, the last man there, or the last woman there. So building roads, building small bridges and, what we call culverts in the country, little sort of joiner of streams. We have had a very large infrastructure road building projects going on. And we are borrowing from various institutions like the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank. Of late, we are borrowing from AIIB, of which we are a founding member also. So in that score, I think, but then again, as you have said, the finance is not the main problem. It's the management. And we have built up a large number of engineers with a lot of experience over the years. We are very happy to say that during our time, we built 2 of the largest projects, bridge building projects in the world, running into 8-9 kilometers in length. Currently, we are building the 3rd project of this scope with completely our own funding. And this has given us a sort of experience to handle large projects quite well. And in terms of just behind the roads, after we build the roads, we've gone to the community with the roads, we would like them to be sort of linked by electricity also, which is very important. And as of today, I can say that we have about 80% coverage of power in our country. And by 2020, we should be able to reach about 100%. Just behind the power generation and the power sort of connections, we have had to build schools, raise literacy, which unfortunately was quite low in the country in the previous days. Now we have reached about in the score of 60-70% in terms of literacy. And we again hope to be about 2021, 2022, we should be able to reach about near 100% literacy rate also. So it's sort of a synergic effort. You have to build roads, give power, build schools. These 3 aspects will have to go together. And Bangladesh government has been sort of looking for not only its own efforts, we have been looking for private sector work in this field, what we call public-private partnership now. Also, we have opened up doors. And another thing that we have done in our country, which is quite significant, is that we are opening to our neighbors. We have a very large neighbor, India. We have our neighbor, Myanmar, to the east. And we have two other neighbors, not immediately touching us, but very near us, like Bhutan here and Nepal. And with these countries, we have had historical sort of links, which were broken during the previous regime. Roads were cut, links were cut for political reasons. Our present government has opened up these doors. We have roads, rails, waterways, which used to exist in the ancient times when our forefathers moved freely and did trade. We are finding the old tracks, and with the help of our neighbors, we are joining up the links which were cut in the old days, so that people can move freely like in the old days and do trade and sort of, contribute to each other's welfare. And that we think is very important. Our present government's policy is to open up to every neighbor in the fullest possible term. Recently, we have signed a program with our big neighbor India, with Nepal, with Bhutan, to open up road traffic, to allow vehicular traffic to move freely between our countries. So this way we think this major problem of building infrastructure can be addressed. And this is the experience that we can share with our neighbors who are in the same strait. So I remember your time constraint, and I would like to also to contribute to your efforts here. I have still about 30 seconds left to give it to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Manan, for that contribution. Ms. Decima Williams, Special Advisor on SDG Implementation to the President of the General Assembly. Madam Williams, we would like to learn from your experiences and knowledge concerning best development practices. It is important that we in the Asia-Pacific region, among the countries with special needs, employ the most efficient ways in achieving SDGs, partly doing it by developing adequate and necessary infrastructure. Could you please compare global practices with those of the Asia-Pacific countries with special needs in terms of focus on infrastructure development? And could you please shed some light on the links between achieving the SDGs and developing physical infrastructure? How can the international community enhance its role in regional efforts aimed at infrastructure development?
Thank you, Mr. President, and again, a warm good evening now to all the participants. You have heard my basic comments and remarks at the opening panel, so perhaps in the interest of being efficient with the use of the time, I will quickly make 3 opening summary points and move forward to the opportunities and the financing. So where are we? I think we have established that we are in the era of Agenda 2030 with the 17 Sustainable Goals. And altogether, we acknowledge that we are at a historical moment for global transformation. And the objective of this transformation is overall sustainability for people and planet, but critically that we leave no one behind in this region or anywhere else in the world. And this is a region where we've just heard 70% of the world's population lies. So clearly the Agenda 2030 has great importance here. And the focus on the CSN, the countries with special needs, is in fact really the spirit and the ethos of Agenda 2030, to identify them and to do something about making sure that special needs countries are addressed in this dispensation. The second main point we can propose is that ESCAP has been a normative and policy setting, research analytic and technical partner with this Asia-Pacific region with 70 years of experience and record in responding to the area, certainly in responding to CSNs. So the strength of the undertaking in this region has a lot to do with the strength, durability, and persistence over 70 years of ESCAP. A third point we can summarize is that infrastructure brings benefits, but which we know, and so we pursue that. But of course, we know that we need, as the report of the Executive Secretary has suggested, we need about 10.5% of GDP levels in order to finance the level of infrastructure needed. But even that which is quite a lot, it's not easily reachable by the group of countries that we are looking at, particularly the sort of LDCs and SIDS countries. So given those three realities, I want to say thanks tremendously to Executive Secretary Akhtar for the report on Asia-Pacific countries with special needs investing in infrastructure for an inclusive and sustainable future. This report already is helping the conversation and the process enormously. I want to refer to three findings in it. The first one is the data limitations that is highlighted. Secondly, the importance of having access to rural areas where in some countries like Vanuatu, the bulk of the population still resides. And a third finding is the very innovative physical infrastructure index, which was talked about. And that's where my next comments will lie in terms of the opportunities. The opportunities are related to these four areas in the physical infrastructure index: transportation, energy, ICT, and water and sanitation. I mentioned in my earlier remarks that all of these are, in fact, being scaled up by the Office of the President. But let me say that the opportunities we have for meeting all of them is maybe two or three key points. First opportunity is to leapfrog from the great deficits to a stronger platform for these countries. Because while they face the hardest challenges in mobilizing finances, if countries with special needs can in fact achieve or acquire the investments needed through technology, they can in fact leapfrog some of the current carbon-intensive productive models and go straight to sustainable methods of production and consumption in transportation, in water, in schools, as we heard, and in all the areas identified in the physical and the ecosystems of infrastructure. So what could ordinarily be a disadvantage could clearly be turned into a great advantage. That's the first opportunity. I think the second one is that in order for us to achieve this transformational change and mobilize finances, what is required is for us to look at the regulatory incentives that guide financial flows today and re-engineer them so that they can incentivize investments in sustainable sectors and sustainable technologies. And this is both for countries to do internally on their own, and we have already heard from some of the panelists that they're going down that road. There is, for example, this index of the ease of doing business. It's an opportunity for countries in special needs to rethink and relook and re-engineer their ease of doing business as a way to attract the needed investments in infrastructure. And also, current subsidies for fossil fuel and large-scale fisheries are examples of regulatory measures outside of these countries that must be reshaped in order to turn financial flows away from the oil production and overfishing and towards renewable energies and sustainable fisheries. Getting the price of carbon internalized into investments is another such measure. So there are many opportunities for adjustments in the system, a system that makes investments attractive and that unleashes new revenues. In the Asia-Pacific region, as in my own, in the Caribbean, where I come from, investing to adapt to and to mitigate the effects of climate change will be crucial to preserve our island nations and our way of life. Already, countries in the Pacific and Caribbean regions have begun to relocate inhabitants away from low-lying areas. But this, of course, cannot be a solution. We have to work to preserve our territories and to make our cities and our rural areas more resilient. So in closing, let me say that there are many facilities that are available for financing, and you know them very well: the Green Climate Fund, the World Bank Group, the risk insurance program that's in the Caribbean that can be available here, and of course regional multilateral banks that can become involved in this new investment wave. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Williams, for that contribution. Our last speaker for the panel would be Mr. Rajiv Biswas from the private sector. And sir, please, if you could, my question would be, what should be the role of the private sector in infrastructure development and maintenance? In particular, please advise how member states' governments can facilitate effective participation of the private sector in financing infrastructure development.
Thank you very much. And I would like to firstly thank UNESCAP for the invitation to join you today, and to focus my comments very much on the role of the private sector and what it can do in terms of providing more financing for countries with special needs. Let me first start with a broader comment, which is that for the whole of the developing Asia-Pacific region, around 800 billion to $1 trillion are needed each year for infrastructure financing. But for the countries with special needs, the financing gap, as has already been mentioned, is in the order of about 4% of GDP. The total infrastructure financing for countries with special needs in the Asia-Pacific is in the order of $48 billion per year. So there is a tremendous challenge there. And as has already been discussed, a lot of the funding that is coming for infrastructure financing is either from domestic public financing or from international public financing sources. The question is, how do you get more private sector financing? And some of the barriers that are facing the private sector in terms of their risk appetite for investing in countries with special needs are issues like political risk, exchange rate risk, repayments risk. Also, many countries with special needs have small, illiquid capital markets, so many investors don't want to invest in illiquid capital markets. So issues around the size of the economy are also a barrier. But if you look at this UNESCAP report that has been published that gives you an index of infrastructure, it's on page 34 for those who would like to look it up. You can see a very sharp divide between some of the middle income to more advanced Asian countries, which have quite advanced infrastructure, and the countries with special needs. If you look at that table, you will see that many of them lack depth of infrastructure in terms of physical infrastructure, transport infrastructure, power infrastructure, and so on. So it's really an inhibitor to the development of their countries and to attracting private capital into the countries. Yet the world is now facing tremendous challenges. Even developed countries are facing huge disruptive change from Internet of Things, industrial automation, the fourth industrial revolution, and developments such as the rapid growth of e-commerce. So at a time when the countries with special needs have a tremendous gap in infrastructure, the more advanced countries are also facing tremendous change. And my fear is that unless mobilization of private sector capital can be accelerated for the countries with special needs, then the gap will become bigger between the countries with special needs and the more advanced emerging markets in Asia. So it's a really important challenge right now to mobilize more both public and private sector financing. One of the instruments that, of course, can be looked at is public-private partnerships. I think the enabling role of the government to allow those sorts of mechanisms is very important within the government regulatory system. So I think we've already discussed that to some extent today. I also want to talk about some other mechanisms. Globally, there's a huge pool of capital sitting in pension funds and insurance funds to the extent of hundreds of billions of dollars. But a lot of that money is locked up and is not available for infrastructure financing because of regulatory requirements within various national requirements for pensions and insurance. So I think globally, one of the challenges is regulatory reform related to pension funds and insurance to allow more of their assets to be invested in infrastructure in general, and of course then to make it more attractive for countries which have special needs. Another important reform, I think, is the development of REITs and infrastructure trusts. Now, many countries with special needs don't have big enough domestic capital markets to be able to create such REITs and infrastructure trusts, but I think, for example, Bangladesh has a stock market capitalization of about $70 billion US, and certainly that would be one country where domestic REITs could play a role, infrastructure trusts as well, listed on the domestic stock market, which can allow capital to be raised to invest in infrastructure development in Bangladesh, for example. I think in the future, countries like Myanmar could also explore that kind of model. Clearly, co-financing is another model that can be used to leverage private sector capital. I think Mongolia is a very good example where the Oyu Tolgoi mine development and involve both public sector and private sector investment with multilateral development banks, national development banks, but also international commercial banks from the private sector. And I think in future, we need to pay a lot of attention to the role of the insurance sector providing risk mitigation to attract private investment into infrastructure, because that kind of insurance product can help to reduce the barriers that private investors face related to political risk and other kinds of repayment risk. So I think the role of private insurance is also very important. And the last point I want to make is that I think there's a role for private equity funds to invest in countries with special needs, but it is going to require some kind of change in the overall environment to make it attractive for private equity funds to create probably vehicles that invest in more than one country. So I could envisage, for example, a private equity fund for the Pacific Island states that would invest in infrastructure projects in the Pacific Island states, and would probably need to involve both the public sector and the private sector. As I mentioned before, the public sector funding from ADB, AIIB, and other public sector investors, the multilateral development banks, national development banks, and national export credit agencies can play an important role in enabling private sector financing to come into such private equity funds. And I think the UN does have a role to play there to bring together the players from the public sector and the private sector who may be able to develop such investment facilities Of course, it's not limited only to the Asia Pacific. I think this is also applicable to countries with special needs in other regions of the world as well. But I think the UN does have a valuable role to play in coordinating that kind of initiative, helping to develop standards for such investment funds that deal with, state-of-the-art environmental standards, social standards, and also capacity building support to help countries with special needs to be able to attract those sort of investments into their infrastructure projects. Because of time, I'm going to stop now, but if you do want further information on private sector mechanisms for investing in infrastructure, there is a more detailed research paper that's already been published, which I can make available for you, for those who would like. So I'm around for the next couple of days, so please feel free to ask me if you would like that paper. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Biswas, for sharing those insights with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid we've come to the end of our allotted time. If you insist, we would have time for just one question to the panelists. Otherwise, we're ready to wrap things up. And as has been stated, the panelists will be mingling with us later on with the dinner. So if you have some follow-up questions, please contact them or email them or something. Then, ladies and gentlemen, let me certainly thank all the panelists for their contributions that they have shared with us. We have certainly learned a lot of things from the challenges as well as the opportunities related to infrastructure development and its financing. The recommendations that have been reflected today certainly will be a part of the subsequent activities of the Secretariat. If we can all give a big hand to our panelists and their insights, please. I now conclude the high-level exchange of the Spatial Body on Least Developed, Landlocked, Developing, and Small Island Development States, and may I invite the panelists to return to their reserved seats and have the chair return to the podium. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Thank you. You all did very well within our started late, but
yeah, okay.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, let me call the session to order, and again, on your behalf, let me thank President of Palau, His Excellency Remy Ngisau, for his moderating the panel, and also the panelists for their very enriching remarks and insights. It was indeed a privilege to listen to all your interventions, so thank you very much indeed. I now, Excellencies, have the great pleasure of closing the session for today, but I would like to remind everyone that we will reconvene tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning, 9 a.m. sharp, here in ESCAP Hall for the high-level dialogue on policy issues for the Asia-Pacific region. I understand there is a reception to be hosted by ESCAP that starts at 7 o'clock this evening, and all of you, all delegates are invited to this reception. The meeting is now adjourned.